Thanks a lot, Maria, and thanks for inviting me. Just a couple of words on myself. I'm here because I was leading, as Maria said, the one of the modules on sustainable tourism within the ESPON project, which was called Bridges on territories with geographical specificities. And as this is ESPON capitalization event, I would also like to say that some years ago, I also participated in another project where we were covering tourism, which was called Greco. It was not about territories with geographical specificities, but many of the things that we'll be discussing today, they are valid for both types of territories. So I was participating on behalf of Technopolis Group at the time. Now I moved on and I'm working for another company. Clara, you can move on. Just a couple of words on ESPON, on Bridges. Bridges was dealing specifically with TGS and was covering several sectors, and tourism was just one of them. We were dealing also with innovation, waste, research, and a number of other sectors. So a couple of points which were part of the Bridges methodology and the Bridges findings, just as a hooker, of course, as a hook, because of course you might like to get into details with different deliverables of Bridges. In line with the Bridges findings, geographical specificities were not regarded as handicaps. This is very important to underline, but more as opportunities and challenges. It was emphasized during the whole work that the problems and that geographical regions with geographical specificities might have come mainly from the governance, and it's mainly a governance issue rather than a territorial issue. And also the geographical specific areas challenge the mainstream discourse on how balanced and sustainable regional growth is to be achieved. I will not go into details on any of those because they are related and associated to all the sectors and not only tourism. Clara, the next slide, please. So Maria also already mentioned about the environmental paradox, whereby we rely on assets, natural and cultural assets, whose survival and health we challenge through tourism. The other point that I would like to highlight is that for sure tourism has impacts, and we need to admit that and to recognize that, and impacts cannot be fully avoided, which means that they should be managed. The risks associated with tourism should be managed rather than entirely avoided, which is probably impossible. In terms of a definition of a sustainable tourism, it's exactly related to what I just said, the tourism that acknowledges the impacts, manages the impacts, and takes full account and responsibility of these economic, social, and environmental impacts. One other kind of definitional point is also that it is sustainable tourism is a process. It is not something that you achieve at one certain date, but it should be continuously sustainability should be continuously integrated into other development actions and sectoral processes. Please, the other one. Of course, as you know, these are some of the major concerns of tourism, not only valid for territories with geographical specificities, but for any type of territories and tourism. And these are the intensity of tourism, especially at some spots, lead to long-term concerns from long-term negative effects. And more specifically, there is sometimes, very often actually, lack of awareness of these events, these effects. Sorry, people might know that there are some negative effects, but what precisely, they don't know. Hence, the importance of monitoring and clarifying the long-term effects of tourism and communicating these back to society in order to spur action for mitigating those impacts. Of course, natural tourism and Iceland obviously relies on natural tourism, is associated with the fragility of ecosystems. And I don't know to what extent the next is valid for Iceland, because obviously Iceland is not the typical island. So we were studying within Bridges islands, sparsely populated areas, coastal areas, and mountainous areas. From my understanding, Iceland is all of that. So it has the features of a sparse populated area, maybe more than an island in a coastal areas, of course. So one of the risks and concerns is diluting local cultural identity. Next, please. My associate with whom I'm working was in Iceland a couple of years ago, and I discussed with her and asked her about her impression and what her observations on the issues of sustainable tourism and sustainable tourism were. And here are some observations of a casual tourist. There are some territorial imbalances and tourist hotspots. At some places, the number of tourists is higher than the local inhabitants. Does it lead to dangers? To be discussed during the afternoon. On the other hand, it is visible that government, local governments, maybe NGOs, they're doing their best to preserve. And these pictures on the Icelandic pledge and some also a description of a nature conservation area is a proof of that. Obviously, there is a pressure on of so-called wildlife tourism, and the issue of transport, which is really related to Iceland as being a territory with geographical specificity. Next, please. In the next two slides, I've gone through all the case studies and the reports that we produced within Bridges, and I managed to try to extract those recommendations, points, issues that I called strategies for sustainable tourism but they are just common sense, let's say, guidance to how to make the tourism a little bit more sustainable. The first that I singled out is informed participation of all stakeholders. You know very well that it's a common effort, that it's not the responsibility of the municipality only, or the NGOs only, or the tourism associations only. It's an effort that should kind of bring together all actors. Strong leadership for consensus building is important because, as Maria said, there are diverging interests and diverging pools in tourism, whereby the interests of promoters and might be contrary to societal interests and environmental interests. So a strong leadership for consensus building is extremely important. I mentioned it already. It's a continuous process, and this means systems for continuous monitoring and corrections of the route are necessary. And very importantly, obviously, the integrated actions are needed on a number of sectors like social, environmental, economic as well. And as I try to illustrate in the figure, making tourism sustainable is basically working on the whole tourism value chain, which means without any ranking, I would just mention the land use planning aspect, the transportation aspect, the waste management, and this is particularly important for small islands, which Iceland obviously isn't. The labeling and environmental management aspect for accommodation services, hotels and campings, the behavioral aspects, also the food, the culinary experience is an important part of tourism. So working on these aspects is working on the sustainability of tourism. Next one, please. I think I'm not certain to what extent Iceland has a problem with seasonality. Probably does, but one of the strategies for making tourism more sustainable, especially in sparsely populated areas, and not only, it is managing of seasonalities. And there are some interesting examples from Sweden and Laponia. I took this because of some similarities with Iceland. There is a need to respect the authenticity of host community, of course, to strike this balance and to mitigate the pressure on the cultural aspects of local communities. And it is all this is based on several case studies, and probably I should mention the case studies. They are not that relevant to Iceland because our case studies were on Tenerife in Spain, in the Atlantic Ocean, and also on the islands in the North Aegean region in Greece. These are the islands close to the Turkish coast. So obviously small islands, southern islands, small territories, summer tourism, so issues are not the same. But it is obvious, one of the conclusions was that introducing innovative offers is an absolute prerequisite in order to manage seasonality and to take tourists away from probably the hotspots at the time where there are the biggest number of them. So innovation in the offers is key. And I wanted to mention about institutional innovation. It was very interesting to me. It is an example from Tenerife in the Canary Islands. They set up the so-called the Canary Factory for Tourist Innovation, which is already quite eloquent as a step, an institution that gathers a number of actors in the Canary Islands and that is trying to develop, to discuss and explore innovation in tourism and sustainability, innovation and sustainability. So that's interesting for me. And in terms of, let's say, different territories of geographical specificities, the case studies came up with some conclusions. Coastal tourism is mitigated if the territory adopts the so-called integrated coastal zone management. I'll not get into details, but one of the main thing is striking a balance, as Maria was explaining, between different usages of the coast. Tourism is just one of them, of course. In terms of islands, in at least in the southern smaller islands, a shift to a circular economy was an absolute necessity, as waste was a really heavy problem there because of the territory and because of the southern climate. And yes, in terms of sparsely populated areas, I already mentioned diversification of the offer and new innovative offers. I think it's the last one, or probably there was one more. Yes, this I will not read those. These are different European and global approaches to sustainable tourism. You certainly know about them. These are different certification schemes, labels, etc. So just drawing your attention to them for those who don't know some of them. Some of them are European, some of them are global, and there are a couple of national ones from Finland and Denmark. I chose those who are closest to Iceland. And Clara, please, the next one. Yes, if somebody is interested to read the case studies on the islands, they are on ESPON's Bridges website, and one is on Tenerife, and the other is North Aegean. So that's it for me.